What's going on, YouTube? You got Bacon here bringing you another video. This one going to be my week 7 battle for the ABC. This week we're going up against Lordxie and the Philadelphia Phantumps. Before I start, just a quick congratulations to Lordxie and his wife on welcoming their baby daughter. It was actually just born a couple days ago. We were originally going to play on Halloween, and then we ended up getting pushed back because he was building the crib, and then we were going to play on Sunday, but then his wife went into labor, so we ended up trying to kind of squeezing it in late at night on, I think, Wednesday or something like that. So another kind of late night game here for us, which obviously didn't go so well for us when we played Zach in the VPL this late at night, but another late night game here. Congratulations again to Lordxie. Thanks for being accommodating with your schedule. It's obviously a huge time commitment, of course, having a child, and it's kind of difficult to manage both that and league at the same time, so I appreciate you kind of working your schedule around to fit me in at some point here. But right now Lordxie's sitting at 3-3, I believe, so still with a shot at playoffs. The top 6 teams in the league do make playoffs. Top 2 get a first round bye. And yeah, 3-3 is definitely right in the thick of the playoff mix. Actually beat Jeff earlier in the season, who is currently, I believe, the 3 seed in the league, and I think locked in at 3 seed actually as well. So obviously Lordxie's a very good battler. Don't know how much time he had to prep, given that the baby was coming and everything. So can't really fault him too much if he's lacking a couple things here or there. Just really quickly going to go over the team that he has. He has available the Celesteela, Mimikyu, Mega Charizard X, Greninja, which of course has to be Torrent, Azelf, Magneton, Chestnut, Donphan, Drapion, Licky, Alolan Sandslash, Abomasnow, and Mimikyu Z as his Z Crystal. Obviously only pairing with the Mimikyu, but +2 Mimikyu Z is no joke. That thing is an absolute, it just hits like a truck. Like, oh my god. Freaking, that thing hits hard. But obviously some other really big threats on his team, like Celesteela, Mega Charizard X, really potent threats you see in OU all the time. He's got the Hail Core, but don't think he was going to bring it, given that I have the Mega Tyranitar to reset Sand, and my team in general really doesn't care too much about things like Alolan Sandslash in the first place. So really wasn't expecting to see the Hail Core this week anyways. But I'll just get in really quickly to what my team is, what I brought here. Quick note, I did bring slightly different nicknames than usual just because we were originally playing on Halloween. I decided to keep them. So we went with some Halloween nicknames here. We got a Dracula, the Gliscor this time, with Toxic Orb, Poison Heal, Protect, Earthquake, U-Turn, and Roost. Protect allows me to scout for the Z move on Mimikyu. Earthquake just hits really hard, specifically against the Charizard. U-Turn can get me out of things like Celesteela and the like, in case he goes for Leech Seed or whatever. I can just U-Turn out into something like my Rotom. And I've got Roost on there as well. So very bulky Gliscor this week. Max HP, a lot of Phys Def investment, and a little bit of speed. Basically, this is my primary Mega Charizard X check. +1 Flare Blitz does not knock me out, and I can knock him out with an Earthquake after he takes the Flare Blitz recoil, and I can also potentially Protect to get some extra recovery if he's something like a 3 attacks Roost kind of set and he just hits me on the switch in. I can Protect to get a little bit of recovery if I need to, or Roost or what have you. So I should be able to check Mega Charizard X. Even if he's carrying HP Ice, I can Protect out of range of a second one as long as I come in when my Toxic Orb is activated. So Gliscor this week just kind of being essential for checking that monster, because otherwise my team's actually not super strong versus Zardex. The team that I brought anyways. Next up we got yet another very similar Rotom Wash set, this time going with Casper for the nickname, just for the Halloween shout out. He's got leftovers, Hydro Pump, Volt Switch, Defog, and Will-O-Wisp, very standard Rotom set. Max HP, again a lot of physical bulk, and the rest into speed. This is kind of a secondary Zardex check. It's a good switch into Celesteela, because even if he Leech Seeds me, I can just Volt Switch out the following turn. Getting burns off on his team is really nice. Things like pretty much nothing on his team appreciates Rotom Wash for the most part, except like Chestnut, which I could still burn with the Will-O-Wisp there. Kind of needed Defog this week, even though I think in general he'd be more pressured to Defog if he brings like the Zard. He does have a lot of hazard potential with things like Chestnut and Greninja spike stacking me, which would not be appreciated. So I brought the Defog this week on Rotom Wash over something like Pain Split. Basically the pivoting on my team is just really nice between even just Gliscor and Rotom Wash is a really nice defensive core versus team. U-turn and Volt Switch being able to get me back out into my appropriate responses, potentially get my my Toxic Orb activated early in the game. So that's kind of the plan going into it. Rotom's not quite my dedicated lead, but it's got a really good lead matchup this week. I can burn pretty much anything. I can Volt Switch on most stuff because Donphan doesn't really want to come in and take a Hydro Pump or a potential Will-O-Wisp. So Rotom Wash just seems like a really safe lead for me this week. So that was kind of my plan going into the match. Next up is Shaman. We got Grace but Spooky. I didn't feel like it was really appropriate to change the Shaman name from Grace, not only because it's Grace, but also look at Shaman. Shaman's not spooky. Shaman's so friendly. Look at it. It's so cute. We got kind of a bulky Shaman as well, so kind of rounding out our defensive core here with a max HP, close to max speed variant of Shaman with a little bit in special defense, kind of helping me with Greninja. Obviously it'll probably be carrying Ice Beam, but it can kind of help with the Greninja. We got leftovers, Leech Seed, Earth Power, HP Fire, and Giga Drain. HP Fire was just kind of the best fit for the team. It's obviously 4 times super effective against both the Mega Abomasnow and the Alolan Sandslash. Can still hit things like the Chestnut a little bit. It's not like Chestnut does too much back to me. Even if he Toxics me or something, I can always switch out and get my natural cure. So Shaman just kind of a nice pivot this week. I can come in on Leech Seed from Celesteela and double out or something like that. I can Leech Seed the Celesteela myself and not quite beat it 1v1, but at least wear that thing down a little bit to put it in range of the rest of my team. And if I Leech Seed the Celesteela, it's pretty much a free switch into my Rotom Wash. Even if he's carrying something like Giga Drain or Seed Bomb, I wouldn't really care too much about it with the Leech Seed plus leftovers recovery on my Rotom. And I can just kind of keep him in the Volt Switch U-turn haze as we go throughout the game. So Shaman just kind of being some nice team glue this week. Only the second time that Shaman's actually come to a match, unfortunately. I think something that I kind of found as the season went on in this format, having 3 OU Pokemon and 3 UU Pokemon kind of encourages me to bring them quite frequently. So I felt like a lot of the lower tiers on my team tended to get left out more often than not, which is unfortunate because I feel like I drafted some really nice low tier Pokemon like Shaman, Dragalge, Swellow. Like Comfey did some work earlier this season, even Frostlass and regular Sandslash. I feel like were really good pickups, but just haven't had to come to a lot of games because my OU Mons basically on their own could come those 6 every week as a team and be pretty effective. But Shaman, Pokemon that I love using in Draft League format. Glad I got to use it more than once this season. So it's back here again. Next up, we got the Raven, Swellow here with Choice Spec, Scrappy, U-turn, Boom Burst, Heat Wave, and Air Slash. His team really doesn't appreciate Swellow too much. Obviously, I have Heat Wave for Celesteela and the Magneton, but otherwise, Boom Burst just hits his team incredibly hard. Scrappy allowing me to hit the Mimikyu with Boom Burst. Obviously, if its disguise isn't broken, it's not going to do any damage. But again, I've got U-turn on there, so the third U-turn Volt Switchmon on the team to this point. Just kind of being able to keep him in the Vortex throughout the course of the game is really nice. And I hit a speed tier that outruns his entire team, I believe. Bar Choice Scarfers and +1s. Let me just check that. Yep, yeah. So I outspeed his entire team naturally with Swellow, and he just, like I said, doesn't have great Choice Specs Boom Burst switch-ins in general, because the things that can switch into it do not appreciate a Heat Wave. So good matchup here for Swellow on paper. Looking for it to do some good breaking. It's a great kind of offensive check to Mimikyu as well. If that thing's disguise is broken, obviously he can't Shadow Sneak me. So as long as my Swellow is alive, I shouldn't be getting swept by a SD Mimikyu or anything like that. Or even a sub Mimikyu, because Boom Burst would go through the substitute, assuming his disguise is broken. Next up here, we've got Infernape coming back. Once again, we got Choice Scarf Infernape this week. My speed tier was such that I was a little bit slower than things like Azelf and Greninja, so I felt like Choice Scarf was kind of necessary. Also at +1, I can offensively check the Megazard X as long as it's chipped a little bit. If it takes Stealth Rocks or something, like regular Charizard form Stealth Rocks is in range of a close combat. But Choice Scarf, like I said, just kind of had a better matchup this week. We're going with Mephistopheles, by the way, for Infernape this week. We got U-turn, Flare Blitz, Close Combat, and Stealth Rock. I didn't really want to fit Stealth Rock anywhere else on the team here. I felt like I kind of needed all of Gliscor's moves, and you'll see all of Mega Tyranitar's moves. So Stealth Rock was fine here. I didn't really need additional coverage. I could have run something like Earthquake, but it really wasn't worth throwing on there. U-turn, fourth U-turn Volt Switchmon on the team. Again, basically all the U-turning and Volt Switchmons are mostly to break the substitute, or the disguise rather, on Mimikyu. because obviously, even though I'm not going to do any damage, just getting momentum out into the appropriate response on Mimikyu, so you turning out into something like my Gliscor would be pretty nice for me. In general, I can get a Toxic Heal turn, I can protect and waste off his Z move, stuff like that. So U-turn being really nice to pressure his team. Things like the Greninja and the Azelf won't appreciate it. Obviously, I have to be worried about the Greninja running Water Shuriken. That's something I did in the VPL. If you go back and watch that match, I ran Life Orb Water Shuriken Greninja against Jeff when I played him there because I was anticipating Choice Scarf and Fernape to come. And obviously, Water Shuriken is going to do a ton of damage to me. So I have to be kind of scout for that earlier in the game if I've gotten Fernape in on Greninja. But otherwise, I think it has a really good matchup this week. And lastly here, we got the Boogeyman, Mega Tyranitar. We got a DD Tyranitar with Crunch, Earthquake, and Fire Punch. Just great coverage for his team. He really doesn't have anything that really appreciates Mega Tyranitar. If I can get a Dragon Dance or two up, the game's pretty much over. There's a couple conditions that need to be met first, namely breaking the Disguise on Mimikyu, and not necessarily chipping Donphan so much, but at the very least breaking it sturdy. A +1 Crunch should do over half to a Donphan, unless he's running a lot of physical defense investment. So basically the idea is to chip down the Donphan, break the Disguise on Mimikyu, set up with Tyranitar and sweep. I should be able to wear down the Donphan no problem. My Shaman and Rotom Wash are both great switch-ins to it. Once my Toxic Orb is activated, I don't care about bringing in Gliscor on it either, because the worst he could do is Ice Shard me at that point. I'm just a little worried early game about knockoff. That's another kind of thing for Protect, is to scout some of his mons out for knockoff to keep my Toxic Orb intact. But yeah, that's kind of the squad rolling into this week. Last 2 weeks of the season here, not going like super hard on the prep end, just because I've already clinched playoffs and a first round bye. But I do still want the #1 overall seed, because I'd rather play Jeff. If I am going to play Jeff again, I'd rather play him in finals than before then, just because we never had that hype Jeff versus me finals matchup in any of the seasons of the VPL. So hopefully we can get that going here in the ABC. I know Zenther's obviously the 2 seed in the league, and his team is no joke either. But basically just hoping to not face one of them until finals is the plan, because I think we've beaten everybody else that's going to make playoffs besides them, I think. And I'm fairly comfortable in the matchups there. But yeah, let's just get right into the match here. See, he didn't bring the Celesteela or the Zardex. He actually just brought Donphan, Magneton, Greninja, Drapion, Azelf, and Mimikyu. So basically it looks like he prepped pretty hard for Reuniclus, actually. Like, Drapion almost entirely here for Reuniclus, I feel. It can obviously do some other stuff. It has some decent coverage options, but I feel like it's mostly here to deal with the Reuniclus, which didn't end up coming. And Magneton's here, presumably to deal with my Scizor, which also didn't end up coming. I obviously saw the Magneton in prep, and I would either have had to run like Akaberry or Shed Shell or something like that, and it just, in general, Scizor just didn't have the greatest matchup this week. I'm anticipating that Azelf to have Flamethrower anyways, so I kind of like my matchup here. Looking at it, not seeing Celesteela or Zardex is really nice for me, because I don't have to worry about chipping down Celesteela either. That's another thing that I'd need for my Tyranitar to sweep late game. So not seeing either of those two is pretty nice, because they're both pretty big threats in general. But let's just get right into the matchup here. Like I mentioned during the team preview aspect of this, Rotom Wash pretty much destroys his team, so I'm just going to lead off with it. I can burn something, I can Volt Switch out. Just really good lead matchup here with Rotom. And he leads Greninja, so this is just a free Volt Switch for me. There's really not much he can do to me, because he can't be carrying Grass Z for like Bloom, Doom, Grass Knot, or anything like that. So I just anticipate getting a slow Volt Switch out here as he U-turns out. He goes into the Magneton, which makes sense, because Magneton's not particularly useful for him this matchup, since I didn't end up bringing the Scizor. And I'm just going to get my Toxic Orb activated immediately. This has kind of been a theme throughout the season, is to keep my Gliscor healthy by activating its Toxic Orb as early as possible, as long as it's not going to lose me too much momentum. In this case, obviously getting in the Gliscor on what I'm anticipating to be HP Fire Magneton is not too much of a problem. I make a little bit of a misplay here, anticipating him to try and save the Magneton. He really doesn't have a reason to. In hindsight, I could have just clicked EQ pretty freely there, but I wanted to U-turn out in case he brought in something like Donphan, so I could get in my Shaman. But since he stays in, I'm just going to go out into my Choice Scarf Infernape. I guaranteed outspeed this thing even if he himself is Choice Scarf, and anticipating him definitely not to save it after risking it versus my Gliscor, I'm just going to Flare Blitz and knock it out. Flare Blitz is the play there that allows Mimikyu, doesn't allow Mimikyu to come in and set up for free. I think he'd more likely go something like Donphan, which he does, and Donphan's no problem for me. I can just go into my Rotom or into my Shaman. I like to go into Shaman here just because I want to get a Leech Seed off on something. I can pivot out into my Rotom Wash if he decides to stay in or anything like that. Or if I Leech Seed him here, it kind of eases my switch-ins to other Pokemon on my team. In this case, he goes out into the Azelf to catch this Leech Seed. Even though Azelf still shouldn't be able to knock me out with anything from here, I am anticipating him to be carrying Flamethrower, so I don't really want to deal with that, because I don't want to take a whole bunch of damage on my Shaman this early in the match, especially when it's a great switch into Donphan over the course of the match. You can take hits from Greninja and things like that. So I'm just going to go right back out into my Rotom as he goes for the Light Screen. So the Leftovers plus Leech Seed here is going to be really nice to heal my Rotom back up pretty close to full. And now that he's gone for screens here, I'm pretty sure he's dual screens, and I'm just going to go for Defog. Defog will get rid of the rocks and the screens. He doesn't end up going for Reflect, which is the smart play to make since I'm going for Defog anyways. He's just going to get in his Drapion for free here. And I've got a little bit of a choice to make. I could go out into my Gliscor since my Toxic Orb has already been activated. I don't mind it getting knocked off, but I'm a little worried about him predicting that and going for Ice Fang on me, which would be really bad. So I just go for Will-O-Wisp, and it turns out I'm faster than this Drapion. It looks like he was probably running a lot of Bulk or Adamant or something like that, because I didn't actually, obviously Rotom doesn't naturally outspeed the Drapion here, but I do get the Will-O-Wisp off on it, so even though he is actually turns out to be Choice Banded, that knockoff's not going to do too much to me. It does kind of suck to lose my Leftovers, but I can freely Volt Switch out here, just get a little bit more chip on that Drapion, and like I said, I know he is a Choice Band knockoff here, and my Gliscor is kind of unhealthy right now, so I'd like to get it back in here, get some Toxic Heal recovery, and Roost up. You can see that Choice Band knockoff through the burn, doing pretty much nothing to Gliscor, even though I still have my item. And I'm going to get right back up to full here by going for Roost. I don't care if he stays in to knock off me again, and even if he gets in Greninja or something like that, I don't lose too much out of it. Instead, he elects to go Donphan, which is fine with me. He probably just wants to get his Stealth Rocks back up, would be my guess. Unfortunately, I don't have Toxic on this Gliscor, so I really can't touch this Donphan too much. So I'm just going to go back out for a U-turn, and I can go once again back out into my Shaman or into my Rotom. Basically, just keeping him in that kind of Volt Switch U-turn cycle, healing up my walls when I need to, and just keeping him on the back foot. Rotom once again comes out here instead of Shaman this time, just because I didn't want him to go for knockoff and remove my Leftovers or anything like that. Potentially go for Ice Shard since my Gliscor was in. I felt like Rotom was the better play because I could defog the rocks, or I could just throw off another Will-O-Wisp or Volt Switch here. In this case, I believe I do elect to just defog again. Keeping rocks off the field is really nice for my Swellow. Even though I don't anticipate it to need to come in very frequently this match, I still like to keep it healthy just in case the Mimikyu gets out of hand or anything like that. But again, this Drapion's burned here, so it's really not doing too much to anything on my team. So I'm just going to go right back out into Gliscor, as he does predict that, and go for the Ice Fang, but with the burn, Choice Band Ice Fang is not going to be able to KO me. Obviously, he can't freeze me, and I can just either go, since my Rotom outsped this Drapion, I know my Gliscor does as well, and I don't really need to go for Roost here, so I'm just going to go for Protect, just to scout out what he's going to do, get another turn of Poison Heal recovery here, because he really doesn't have great Earthquake switch-ins here. Like, yeah, he could go Azelf, but I've already shown U-turn, and he probably wouldn't want to risk all that damage here, especially because I could get right back out into something like Infernape, Tyranitar, or Swellow on the Azelf. So I'm just going to get right back up to full. I'm going to go for U-turn here, predicting him to switch out into the Donphan, but he decides to stay in, and just, I know he's going for Ice Fang once again, and this time I'm just going to go out into my Infernape. I didn't want to risk a freeze on my my Rotom Wash here. And getting Infernape in is really nice because I can pressure his team with Flare Blitz. He really doesn't have good Flare Blitz switch-ins here, and he also doesn't have many good U-turn switch-ins here. I'm looking at the damage calc, and it says I should KO with U-turn, but I wasn't kind of accounting for the fact that he underslowed my, or he was slower than my Rotom, so that probably meant he was running Bulk, which means he's going to live on 1 HP here and go for Ice Fang again. I just got to hope he doesn't freeze my Rotom, which would really suck here, but he doesn't, and the Drapion's going to go down to burn from Rotom Wash. Basically back at where I started at the beginning of the game. Rotom Wash had a great lead matchup, and it still has kind of like a second chance to lead off here versus team. There's not too much that he can do to pressure me outside of going Azelf. Obviously, I don't really want to take a hit, but I don't have necessarily the greatest switch-ins to Azelf. I don't want to go hard Tyranitar. I'm just taking damage on that thing if I'm trying to sweep with it later. So I'm just going to go for Volt Switch here as he goes for the Light Screen. So through Light Screen, Volt Switch is going to do pretty much nothing to this Azelf. And I've got basically a choice here of what I can go into. I feel like Infernape's the best play here to go for a U-turn, because even if he goes for Reflect, I can go right out into Rotom and defog his screens again. And I was actually thinking U-turn would potentially KO this Azelf, but it looks like he might be running a little bit of bulk on this too. I actually didn't end up calcing that one after the fact. But he just goes for the Reflect. So he's got both screens up now. I can defog those away, or I can waste some turns like defog, Will-O-Wisp, what have you. He goes for Signal Beam and weakens my Rotom a little bit more, which is unfortunate because I decide not to knock out the Azelf here. Prioritize getting rid of the screens first to make sure the Mimikyu doesn't get free setup on me. So I am going to have to eat another Signal Beam here as I just go for Volt Switch. I believe Volt Switch on this turn, just to guaranteed hit this Azelf. And I've got a couple options here. Basically, I don't want to let the Mimikyu in. Anything I can do to stop the Mimikyu from setting up on me, which is really the only threat to my team at this point, is the thing I'm going to try to do here. So I'm just going to go Gliscor, get a little bit more Poison Heal recovery here, and either bait in the Donphan or the Greninja. Even if he goes into the Mimikyu here, I can just U-turn out and break its disguise. He elects to go into his Greninja. He could be going for Ice Beam here. So I'm just going to protect what he and scout out what he goes for. I don't think this thing's carrying Hazard since he U-turned out on the first turn of the game. He goes for Surf here. I'm pretty sure, like, the way he's been playing it, I'm thinking this is some kind of choice-locked Greninja, whether it's Scarf or it's Specs or something like that. I'm pretty sure he's choice-locked, so I'm just going to go out into my Shaman to take this Surf. I feel like if otherwise he would have just clicked Ice Beam, predicting the Shaman in the first place. But I see this Surf damage come off here, and it actually does turn out that it's Choice Specs Greninja. I know it doesn't really look too much like Choice Specs damage since that only did 24%, but Greninja's attack and stats aren't the best in the first place. I could just get a free Leech Seed here with my Shaman as he goes out into Donphan, presumably just to sack it off and get his Mimikyu in. But Leech Seed's really nice for me. He's going to get my Shaman right back up to full again. I can still pressure this Donphan with Giga Drain if I choose to, but I'd rather have something else in after the Donphan goes down, so I'm going to go out into my Rotom Wash just to get a little bit more recovery on him. He really can't do too much to me. He goes for the Ice Shard and gets a tiny bit of chip off. I'm actually going to start to heal up a little bit here with my Rotom, which is pretty nice. I could knock out the Donphan with a Hydro Pump, but predicting him to either save it or even if he stays in, not be able to do much to me, I'm just going to spam Volt Switch at him. If he goes out into Mimikyu, I'm going to break his disguise. If he goes out into Greninja, I'm not going to KO it, but I'm going to do a lot of damage to it. And if he stays in, I'm just going to keep eating up some Leech Seed recovery. He ends up going for Stealth Rocks, which I can defog away with this Rotom. I could also potentially burn this thing to make sure it does even less damage to me. But I'm just going to Volt Switch again here. I probably shouldn't have in this case just because I kind of forgot that Rapid Spin removes Leech Seed, so I can't just infinitely heal up on the Donphan. So a little bit of a misplay there on my end, but I don't think it's going to cost me too much at this point. Here I'm just going to burn, throw off a burn with Rotom, just in case he decided to go hard Mimikyu or something, predicting, I don't know what he'd be predicting, Hydro Pump or something like that. But he's just going to sit in here. He seems pretty content to sack off the Donphan at this point. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to defog the rocks and then knock out this Donphan. Even if he spams Stealth Rocks at me, I've got plenty of defogs here, and eventually he probably won't. He probably won't, figuring I'll stay in as forever spamming defog. So I'm just going to spam defog at him until he stops going for Stealth Rocks. Turns out it's this turn. He just goes for Rapid Spin to get a teeny bit more chip off on my Rotom Wash. And I'm just going to go for Hydro Pump now to knock out the Donphan. Even if he goes into Greninja, it's not a huge deal for me because I don't really anticipate it to be able to do much. But Hydro Pump's going to connect here and knock out the Donphan. And now he basically has to go out into Greninja because he can't risk like Volt Switch breaking his sub on Mimikyu or Will-O-Wisp burning it or anything like that. So I'm just going to click Volt Switch here as he goes into Greninja. Like I mentioned, I don't think he can really touch me, but it turns out I do die to Choice Spec Surf from that range. It was a roll in his favor, I believe, to knock me out from that range because I took the extra turn of Rapid Spin chip from my little over prediction there with the Donphan. No big deal, it's just going to cost us a differential point. I can freely go into Shaman here and click Giga Drain. I know he's Choice Specs into Surf here. If he goes into Mimikyu, I break his disguise, which basically means I win, or he stays in and I Giga Drain, get all my health back, and unfortunately put him in Torrent range, so I don't knock him out with a Giga Drain here, which means Torrent boosted, Choice Specs Surf is going to do a little bit more to this Shaman, but I'm still eating those hits up pretty well. Going for Giga Drain again, getting a little bit more leftovers recovery, and the Mimikyu really can't do much to me at this point either. I'm not going to risk a Leech Seed miss here. I'd rather just get off the, or break the substitute, or the disguise rather, on the Mimikyu. Clicking Leech Seed really doesn't do much for me when Choice Specs Boom Burst is already a roll to OHKO it in the first place. So I'd rather break the disguise and then go out into my Gliscor to take a potential Z move. Gliscor's kind of served its purpose at this point in the match, and if I go out into Swellow afterwards, I should be able to knock it out with Boom Burst. At this point in the season, I really don't care too much about my differential as long as I'm winning, to guarantee myself that first round bye and the #1 overall seed. But here it turns out he's red card Mimikyu, which is presumably to force out some of my potential setup threats, which means he actually doesn't have the Z move, so he's not even going to be able to 2-hit KO my Gliscor with Play Rough, as you can see. That physical defense investment coming in pretty clutch, so I can dodge that 2-hit KO and be able to 2-hit KO back with Earthquake, uninvested Earthquake and Gliscor, still being able to do the job on Mimikyu, which is otherwise pretty frail. I could have protected here to get myself out of range of a crit Play Rough, potentially, but there's no reason for me to do that. Even if he crits me, I can just go out and Swellow win the game. So Gliscor here is going to be able to clean up because he does not get crit, and that's going to be a nice 5-0 victory for us. Basically was in control for the entire match. I didn't feel kind of too pressured at any point during the game. I felt like I had a really good defensive core to handle his potential threats. Azelf was really the only thing on the team that I realized, well, kind of looking at my team, that I realized I didn't really have great answers for. Otherwise, I felt like I had pretty good responses to everything he brought. Tyranitar didn't even have to hit the field. Swellow didn't even have to hit the field. So basically just a really nice solid victory for us. And that puts us at 7-0 now with a monstrous differential. I think we're sitting at plus 31 now on the season. 7-0 plus 31. So we've been having a really good season so far, of course. I credit that mostly to having a really awesome draft. Love building with this team. It's so fat. And it's got like great offensive presence as well. Just a really nice kind of bulky offense, balance type build, maybe bulky balance, if that's a thing. Just a really fun team to use so far in the season. We're 7-0 now, looking to go 8-0 next week. It's the last week of the regular season next week, so hoping to pick up another victory there and finish off the season 8-0. It'd be really nice to guarantee ourselves that #1 overall seed. GG to Lordxie. Sorry we kind of had to squeeze this game in. I know it's been really crazy on your end with the baby and everything, so thank you very much for playing in this season of the ABC, this first season. Hopefully you can turn around this last week of the season here and potentially make playoffs. There is still potential there for Lordxie to make playoffs even with a loss this week, but I know, of course, with the baby you'll be busy and everything, so even if you don't end up making it, congratulations once again on starting your family here, and I'll see you guys all next week. Thank you very much for watching to this point if you did. Have a good one. Bye-bye.